globally not only to Asia but also to America, EU countries, Arabic and African countries.
Coming up on Arirang News. North Korea has been illegally using South Korean-owned facilities at now-shut Kaesong Industrial Complex without permission. Also, Seoul demands Pyongyang to stop demolishing the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office building that the regime blew up in 2020. The latest trade data shows that South Korea's current account surplus extended for 6 months in a row in October on the back of a rebound in exports led by automobiles and petroleum products. Fears in Gaza grow amid Israel's widening offensive into the southern part of the enclave, including the population center Khan Yunis, where officials say has no safe places for civilians. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with signs of North Korea illegally using South Korean-owned facilities at the Inter-Korean Joint Industrial Park without permission. The North is also demolishing the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office building, which it blew up in 2020. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil takes a look at what's behind its intentions.
South Korea's Ministry of Unification told reporters on Friday that it has detected signs of unauthorized North Korean movement at the Kaesong Industrial Complex.
Despite repeated warnings from our government, North Korea continues to use the facilities of South Korean companies in the Kaesong Industrial Complex without authorization. And recently, it's been demolishing the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office building that it blew up in 2020.
The spokesperson added that the North will be held responsible for violating the property rights of South Korea. Back in 2020, Pyongyang released a video of it blowing up the Joint Liaison Office used for talks between the two Koreas as a sign of severing an important means of communication with Seoul. In May of this year, the Unification Ministry announced that North Korea had cleaned up remnants of the explosion. The building was then left unattended, but since the end of November, there have been signs that North Korea has begun demolishing it.
In the grand scheme of things, the demolition shows the current state of inter-Korean relations. On the other hand, the North might have strategic intentions to put pressure on the South Korean government.
There were also signs of unauthorized usage of around 30 facilities of South Korean companies at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. This is 3 times the amount that the ministry announced in May.
Kaesong Industrial Complex is one of the very good candidates to bring some kind of economic achievement for the North Korea. So that's why at this moment, North Korea is trying to use the South Korean assets in the Kaesong Industrial Complex.
However, South Korean officials did not pinpoint which companies the facilities belong to. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
The U.S. is backing South Korea's decision to partially suspend the 2018 Inter-Korean military agreement, saying it's a cautious and restrained response to North Korea's continuous violations of UN Security Council resolutions. This as South Korea's National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong met with his U.S. counterpart Jake Sullivan on Friday ahead of Saturday's Trilateral top security advisors meeting between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Cho also met with his Japanese counterpart Takeo Akiba earlier in the day separately, where they discussed the recent progress made in bilateral relations and reaffirmed a willingness to continue enhancing cooperation in security, economy, and people-to-people exchanges. The upcoming Trilateral meeting is a follow-up to the Camp Davis summit earlier this year. On the trade front, South Korea's current account surplus extended for 6 months in a row in October on the back of a first rebound in exports in more than a year. Our Moon with the details.
South Korea's current account has logged a surplus yet again on the back of improving performance in exports and a decline in imports. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday showed a current account balance of $6.8 billion in October. This is the 6th month in a row for a surplus to be recorded and is also the highest so far this year. The goods account tracking imports and exports experienced a surplus for the 7th straight month as auto exports rose and imports of raw materials fell. Data show that auto exports rose by 21% compared to the same month last year, whereas inbound shipments of gas fell by over 54% and coal by 26%. It's the first time since August 2022 that the country has seen an on-year rise in export value, rising by 7.6% compared to October last year. When comparing the goods balance between January and October this year and last year, this year's export value was lower, but as the import value was also lower, the overall goods balance for the period was higher this year. However, the services balance, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, recorded a deficit of $1.25 billion. The travel and transportation sectors showed significant declines on year, with the latter falling from a $1 billion surplus to a $300 million deficit this October. So far this year, the services balance logged a deficit of over $20 billion, which is a sharp decline compared to the same period in 2022, when a deficit of just over $3 billion was recorded. Increased outbound travel as a result of eased COVID-19 restrictions has led to a continued travel balance deficit, but the decline is slowing.
The trade balance deficit has decreased with more tourists from Southeast Asia and Japan.
Meanwhile, the primary account balance responsible for monitoring foreign workers' wages and overseas dividend payments reported a surplus of nearly $3 billion, further contributing to the overall current account surplus. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Moving on, Hanwha Aerospace has sealed a deal worth some $2.4 billion to supply Redback armored vehicles to Australia. According to the Defense Acquisition Program Administration on this Friday, Hanwha is selling 129 Redback infantry fighting vehicles to Australia. This final count comes 4 months after the Korean aerospace and defense company was selected as the preferred bidder. This latest deal is Hanwha's second for the export of ground-based military equipment to Australia, following an earlier accord to supply K9 self-propelled howitzers signed in December 2021. South Korea set an ambitious goal of attracting 20 million tourists to the country in 2024. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo led a cabinet meeting on Friday on ways to boost tourism and unveiled benefits to be offered to visitors. Given that 17.5 million people came to the country in 2019, reaching a peak, the figure would be an all-time record if the goal is met. Foreign nationals from Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia will now be exempt from group electronic visa fees, along with Chinese nationals. The limit for tax-exempt duty-free shopping will also be doubled. With the hope of boosting sales, retailers here in the country are getting into the holiday spirit well before Christmas. Our Lee Soo-jin has more on their efforts.
Christmas has already arrived in the retail sector as it's using the winter holiday as a last-ditch marketing strategy to boost consumption. South Korea's CCSI, an indicator of how consumers feel about the economy, has been declining since July. And the pessimistic consumer sentiment is being felt by department stores as operating profits of the big three all fell by double digits in the third quarter. To draw consumers, the big three department stores have built replicas of traditional Christmas markets that are bigger than ever. Here in this colossal glass house are more than 20 wooden chalets that sell seasonal beverages and souvenirs reminiscent of Europe's famous Christmas markets. Although it was inspired by Europe, the market also sells popular Korean street foods such as tteokbokki and fish cakes. To maximize holiday season sales, it was opened toward the end of November and has already encouraged people to spend money.
Oh, it's so beautiful, it's so cute. I really love it. I'm sure that I'll be back to buy things for sure.
We actually just bought candy apples here, and they were even better than what I imagined.
And on weekends, visitors have to wait hours just to get in. It's not just department stores like this one. They've already begun using Christmas as a marketing strategy to boost consumption. Small businesses have also begun to do the same. Inside this traditional market is a cake shop run by a young entrepreneur. In a nod to her store's location, she sells cakes made out of rice cake ingredients instead of flour. She steams the rice cake into a circular shape and is decorated with colorful frosting along with cake toppers that make it look like the cakes that we typically see in bakeries. She says that she started accepting Christmas cake orders early during the second to last week of November.
Even though this type of cake is usually bought by older people, around Christmas the demand goes up because young people also buy it.
One expert says that all these efforts are likely to pay off.
The Christmas markets and cakes will act as a catalyst of sorts that lead people to purchase items not holiday-related as well.
She added that while consumers this year might not have a large disposable income, these early Christmas marketing campaigns will motivate customers to open up their wallets. 이수진, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, along with the continuous offensive happening in Southern Gaza, humanitarian concerns are rising about attacks on so-called safe zones in the region. Gaza's health ministry, run by Hamas, says 350 were killed in the past 24 hours due to intense Israeli bombardments. Our Park Gun-woo has more.
3 days after Israel expanded its military offensive to Khan Yunis, the largest city in southern Gaza, concerns about possible attacks on the humanitarian zone in South Gaza are now rising. Those concerns come after the Israeli military posted videos, maps, and satellite photos on Thursday local time, saying 14 rockets have been fired toward Israel from several locations in southern Gaza, including Al-Mawasi, where civilians are seeking shelter. The Israel Defense Forces said Hamas militants abused the people of Gaza, utilizing them for its acts of terror from safe zones. The IDF has encouraged civilians to relocate to areas such as Al-Mawasi, one of the few places left to seek safety, producing videos and releasing maps of the area in both Arabic and English since the early days of the war. But an Israeli military spokesman said he could not speak about future operations, and it is not clear yet whether Israel would designate the safe zones as legitimate military targets, as they did previously, portraying the Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza as a Hamas command and control center before occupying it. The official added civilians of Gaza were being updated frequently in various ways about Israeli military activities. According to Gaza's health ministry, around 350 Palestinians were killed in IDF attacks, with another 1,900 injured on Thursday alone. It added the cumulative death toll since the start of the armed conflict on October 7th has surpassed 17,100, with 46,000 injured, mostly women and children. Meanwhile, after a guided missile attack by Hezbollah killed a 60-year-old man in northern Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a stern warning to the terrorist group.
If Hezbollah chooses to start an all-out war, then it will, by its own hand, turn Beirut and southern Lebanon, not far from here, into Gaza and Khan Yunis.
Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
The heads of the world's top two oil exporters, Saudi Arabia and Russia, spoke with one voice on the need to cut crude oil output. This comes following a face-to-face meeting on Wednesday between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during Putin's rare one-day trip to the Middle East. They issued a joint statement that calls all OPEC Plus members to join the oil cuts to stabilize the market for the good of the global economy. Meanwhile, Putin announced on Friday that he'll run for re-election in 2024, seeking his fifth term in office. During the last regular National Assembly plenary session today, lawmakers passed the confirmation motion for the top court's Chief Justice nominee, Cho Hee-dae, ending a 2-month-long vacancy. In the meantime, 4 contentious bills, including a pro-labor bill, which President Yoon vetoed last week, were also put to a revote, and all were voted down. Shin Se-byuk explains.
The National Assembly has approved the appointment of Cho Hee-dae as the next Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. In the last regular plenary session of the Assembly on Friday, attended by 292 lawmakers, a confirmation hearing report on Cho was passed by 264 voting to 18, with 10 abstentions. This came 2 months after lawmakers rejected the previous nominee, Lee Gyun-yong, the first such rejection in 35 years. Meanwhile, 4 contentious bills were put for a revote following President Yoon Suk-yeol's veto of them last Friday, of which all were voted down. These bills include the pro-labor Yellow Envelope Bill and 3 revisions to broadcasting laws. To override a presidential veto, a 2/3 majority from a plenary session with more than half of all lawmakers in attendance is needed. The ruling People Power Party said the proposed labor bill violates legal principles, while the main opposition Democratic Party claimed the proposed law guarantees workers' rights.
The proposed labor law not only goes against the principles of legal clarity, proportionality, and the no penalty without a law rule, but also violates the principle of equality. It's a law that shakes the foundation of the long-established labor management relationship in our society, only serving to escalate social conflicts.
This bill simply guarantees workers the right to negotiate with their employers to rectify injustices, unfair conditions, and an unjust environment. What makes you think the National Assembly has the right to declare that these workers don't have the qualifications for such rights?
As for the revisions to the broadcasting laws, the ruling party stated that these changes would severely undermine fairness and content delivery. In contrast, the Democratic Party, which holds the majority, argued that such amendments were necessary to ensure press freedom. This marks the 3rd time that bills have been scrapped due to President Yoon's exercising his veto right since his inauguration. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, as the regular National Assembly session concludes on December 9th, the nation's main rival political parties have agreed to hold a 30-day extraordinary session starting next Monday. 3 plenary sessions will be held on December 20th and 28th, as well as January 9th. The session on the 20th aims to finalize next year's budget as lawmakers failed to meet the December 2nd deadline. 2 other sessions on the 28th and January 9th will focus on processing bills related to people's livelihoods. South Korea will launch a pan-governmental task force to address rising concerns about the increasing number of children with respiratory illnesses. At a meeting today, Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency Commissioner Ji Young-mi said that the task force will be responsible for monitoring respiratory diseases and managing medicine supplies and hospital beds. This comes as cases of children infected with Mycoplasma pneumoniae, a leading cause of pneumonia, have begun to rise in schools, kindergartens, and daycare centers. However, she cautioned against new pandemic fears as Mycoplasma pneumonia is not a new infectious disease, and there are known effective treatments to deal with it. As the chilly weather sets in, this is the best time to stay in and watch a good movie or a show. Korea's streaming scene is already buzzing with options amid 2 local streaming giants, TVing and Wave, having signed a deal for a merger. Our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin tells us how this deal might reshape the Korean content and streaming landscape.
Are we about to witness the birth of Korea's largest streaming service? Local streaming giants TVing and Wave have signed a memorandum of understanding for a merger. CJ ENM's TVing is the 2nd largest domestic streaming platform with 5.1 million monthly active users. SK Square's Wave is 4th with 4.23 million. When combined, their total of more than 9 million expected users would make them the leading domestic streaming service provider. The 2 rivals coming together was not a surprise. This marks the second merger between local streaming services following TVing's merger with KT's 시즌 last December. Industry experts view this as a strategic move for survival.
With the rise of numerous streaming service brands, not only Netflix but also Disney+, there has been constant discussion about the crisis facing domestic services. The merger between TVing and Wave is seen as a way to secure a competitive edge against industry leader Netflix.
In terms of numbers, the merged platform will fall short of Netflix's 11.3 million monthly active users. However, this could change in the long run.
This is exciting news for consumers because they can access a diverse range of content with a single subscription fee. Wave has programs on terrestrial TV channels, while TVing has been building its lineup with entertainment shows and dramas on TVN. On top of that, each platform has its partnerships with streaming services abroad.
This move could also realize the long-envisioned dream of local streaming services: global expansion. Both companies already have the experience and know-how, with CJ E&M acquiring global production studio Endeavor Content and Wave America acquiring US-based video streaming platform Cocoa.
In the case of Netflix, subscriber numbers tend to peak when it releases an original series. This indicates that without compelling original content, a streaming service won't be able to compete globally. There's anticipation that through the merger, the combined investment capacity could increase, which could lead to more original content from the two platforms.
The two companies are expected to finalize a definitive agreement by the middle of next year to conclude the merger process by the end of 2024. 송유진, Arirang News.
Even though December had come around, the weather feels like early spring. The unseasonably high temperatures are expected to continue tomorrow. With warm spells, the temperature swings will be around 15 degrees. Please dress warmly both in the morning and the evening. The dry conditions on the East Coast are getting worse. In addition, the East and West Coast will have gusty winds of more than 20 meters per second. Please take extra precautions against wildfires. The smoke from overseas flowing again today, increasing the concentration of ultra-fine dust in the west. The air is expected to be murky throughout the weekend in this area. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daegu will start off at 9 degrees Celsius. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to 15, Daegu and Gwangju 19 degrees Celsius. The temperatures will be far above usual, so no need to worry about the cold throughout the weekend. Rainfall is in the forecast across the country early next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with our AI headline news. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.